Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I like to follow rules. I check parking signs, look up local rules when unsure, and try to be nice to others. Living in San Francisco makes this hard sometimes, especially with parking. My girlfriend lived in this 6-unit apartment building in a neighborhood where finding parking was rare. That's why I bought a scooter last year, a small blue Vespa that cost me $1,200. It was worth every penny for the convenience alone. One night, I went over to her place around 10 p.m. for our weekly board game night. We played Settlers of Catan, and I wanted to win a game. We had been dating for about 8 months, and she always beat me at strategy games. I parked my scooter in what I thought was a good spot, between 2 driveway cutouts on a small curb space about 3 feet wide. I was not blocking anyone's garage. There were 2 cars already parked in front of the garage doors, and I put my scooter between them on the curb. One was a red Honda Civic, the other a black Tesla Model 3. I'd been to her place many times and knew the building layout. There were 3 garage doors, and between each door, the building had no parking signs posted. But these signs were between the garages, not on the garage doors themselves, and I made sure my scooter wasn't blocking any driveway. I even took a photo of how I parked, something I started doing after getting an unfair parking ticket downtown last month. The game night was fun. My girlfriend had invited 2 other couples from her work, and we played for hours. I built the longest road and got enough points to win, which made me happy. We ordered pizza around midnight and kept playing until everyone was tired. Around 2 a.m. I said goodbye to my girlfriend and left. That's when I found the note. It was folded and tucked under my scooter seat, written by someone who seemed very angry. The handwriting was so intense that the pen had torn through the paper in several places. The 2 cars that had been parked there when I arrived were still in the same spots. I read the note. The writer asked if I was illiterate or had poor spatial awareness. They asked if I cared if my bike got damaged when they pulled out, saying I hadn't left enough room. They also asked if I cared about being cited or towed. The note told me to move my bike before I regretted ignoring the no parking sign and ordered me not to park there again. They said there were many other spaces for me to park. I looked around and counted exactly 0 available parking spaces on the entire block. I read the note again. I found it funny. The person who wrote this was so angry about a scooter that wasn't even blocking their garage. I put the note in my pocket and rode home. The ride back to my apartment took about 20 minutes. The whole way, I kept thinking about the note and how some people just look for things to be angry about. The next day at work, I showed the note to my coworker who also rides a scooter. She laughed and shared stories about similar notes she'd received. She suggested I look up the actual parking laws to see if I was in the right. I kept thinking about the note. Was I wrong? Had I missed something about parking rules? I looked up the San Francisco parking codes during lunch. What I found was interesting. According to city code, you cannot park in front of your own garage if you live in a building with more than 2 units. Also, no parking signs are only legal if they're on the garage door itself, not between garage doors. I even found a specific ordinance number, section 32.6b of the San Francisco Transportation Code. This meant 2 things. First, whoever left me that note was wrong about the law. Second, the no parking signs between the garage doors were not legal. I printed out the relevant sections of the code and highlighted the important parts. I called San Francisco's 311 service and reported this. The call took about 15 minutes as I waited on hold. I told the operator about the illegal no parking signs at the apartment building. I gave the address and explained how there were signs posted between garage doors instead of on them. I also said I knew residents weren't allowed to park in front of their own garages in buildings with more than 2 units. The operator was surprised and thanked me for bringing this to their attention. They told me I was right about both things. They said they would send someone to check the property and fix any problems. They gave me a case number and said I should see results within 7 to 10 business days. I told my girlfriend about the situation that evening over the phone. She was impressed that I took the time to research the law instead of just getting angry about the note. She also told me she thought she knew which neighbor might have left the note, an older man who lived on the first floor and complained about everything. When I visited my girlfriend a week later, I saw that the no parking signs between the garages were gone, and there were no cars parked in front of any garage doors. A notice had been posted in the building's lobby explaining the parking regulations. I learned later that the building manager had been fined $250 for the illegal signage. It seems the city came by, confirmed the problems, removed the illegal signs, and told the residents about the rule against parking in front of their own garages in multi-unit buildings. I felt bad for the other residents who had been parking in front of their garages for a long time. They lost their parking spots because one person couldn't handle a scooter legally parked near their garage and left a mean note. One resident, an elderly woman, approached me in the lobby. She recognized my scooter and asked if I was the one who reported the signs. She wasn't angry but curious about why the rules had suddenly changed after years. I explained what happened and she nodded in understanding. At least someone in the building was reasonable. As for the note, I put it on my refrigerator where it still is today. I framed it in a cheap $5 frame from the dollar store. When friends visit, they read it and we laugh. Some of them have started collecting their own angry notes from strangers. We're thinking of making a collage of entitled people's handwritten rage. I'm thankful to that angry neighbor in a way. Their anger gave me a funny story and taught an entire building about parking rules in San Francisco. I never did find out exactly who wrote the note, though my girlfriend had her suspicions. The next few times I visited, I noticed someone watching me from a first-floor window as I parked my scooter. I still ride my scooter around the city and park it legally. I always check the parking rules now to be sure. I even downloaded the San Francisco parking app that shows all the legal spots nearby. Not because I'm afraid of getting another angry note, but because knowing the rules is my best defense against people who think they can make up their own. My girlfriend and I eventually broke up 6 months later for unrelated reasons, but every time I see a scooter parked between driveways, I smile. And whenever I hear people complain about parking in San Francisco, I tell them this story. I've been working at this small marketing agency for just over a year now. It's my first real job after college, and I've been thrilled to have actual clients and responsibilities. Well, I was thrilled until we got a new account manager. Not her real name, obviously. Let me back up a bit. After graduating with my marketing degree, I spent 6 months sending out applications and going on interviews that led nowhere. The job market was brutal, especially for new grads with zero experience. When this small agency finally took a chance on me, I was over the moon. The team was only about 15 people, and everyone wore multiple hats. I handled everything from social media scheduling to client presentations, and I loved the variety. My clients seemed to appreciate my work too. I made it a point to be responsive, clear, and helpful. If they needed something, I'd get back to them right away. If there was a problem, I'd own it and fix it. Simple stuff, right? This approach had earned me several compliments from clients and even a gift basket at Christmas from our biggest account. Then management hired her. She came from one of those corporate mega agencies where they micromanaged the living daylights out of everyone. From day one, she had concerns about my communication style with clients. According to her, I was too casual and not projecting enough authority. Whatever that means, I tried to adjust my approach. I added more formal language to emails, used more industry jargon, and tried to sound more authoritative. But it was never enough for her. She always found something to nitpick. Last month, after I sent what I thought was a perfectly normal email to our biggest client about a small scheduling change, she called an emergency meeting. She started the meeting by telling me there was something urgent we needed to discuss regarding client communications. When I asked if everything was okay and if the client had complained, she said no, but they could have. She told me that my email about the schedule change lacked proper context and detail, and she was concerned this was becoming a pattern. I tried to defend myself, mentioning that I've been communicating with this client for months without issues, and they had actually praised my responsiveness. That's when she dropped the bomb. She told me that from now on, she needed to approve all client communications before they went out. Emails, phone call notes, text messages, meeting agendas, everything had to be sent to her first for review. When I pointed out that this would slow down our response times, she dismissed my concern with a wave of her hand. She told me it was about quality control and that it was better to be right than fast. She gave me that fake smile managers use when they're being unreasonable but pretending they're helping you. Fine. You want all communications? You got it. I started that very afternoon. Every single thing. If a client asked what time a call was scheduled, I drafted an email response and sent it to her. Awaiting your approval on this time confirmation. If a client texted asking for a quick file, I'd screenshot it and email her. Please approve my response to this text message. I even created a special folder in my drafts called Awaiting Manager's Approval and set up an automated counter. By the end of day 1, I had sent her 17 approval requests. By the end of week 1, it was over 100. I stopped answering my phone when clients called. Instead, I'd let it go to voicemail, then email her. I would explain that client X had called about why, attach my proposed response, and ask for her approval. After about 2 weeks, she was drowning. She'd fallen behind on approving my communications, which meant clients weren't getting responses. They started escalating to her directly, which doubled her workload. One morning, she stopped by my desk looking frazzled. She asked if I had really sent her 14 approval requests the day before. I confirmed that I had, explaining that I'd had a lot of client interactions and was just following protocol. When she asked if I really needed approval to tell a client what time our standing meeting was, I told her that she had said all communications and I was just being thorough. She walked away. The breaking point came when our biggest client emailed both of us complaining about delays. The client told us that they had been waiting for feedback on the campaign assets for 3 days, and this delay was putting their timeline at risk. They wanted to know what was going on. I responded to the client by saying I had forwarded their concerns to my manager for approval of my response, and once approved, I would get back to them promptly. I copied her on that email too, of course. The next morning, she stopped by my desk looking exhausted. She told me she thought we needed to adjust our approval process. When I asked if there was a problem, she said that moving forward, I should just use my judgment for routine communications and only send her things that involved project scope, timeline changes, or budget discussions. I asked if she was sure, mentioning that I had about 30 draft responses waiting for her review right then. She told me that wouldn't be necessary anymore. When I asked about phone calls and whether I should still send summaries for approval, she said no, that was fine, and I should just handle those directly. I asked about text messages, and she told me to use my judgment. I started to ask about something else, but she told me I should just do what I was doing before, because it was working. I've been happily sending emails without approval for 2 weeks now. She barely makes eye contact in the hallway, and that's fine by me. My quarterly review is coming up, and all those approval emails are documented proof that I've been trying my best to follow company protocol. Yesterday, the CEO stopped by my desk to thank me for keeping our biggest client happy, despite what he called recent communication hiccups. Mentioned that they'd signed on for another year and mentioned my name as a reason they were staying. I just smiled and said I was happy to be part of the team. I bought my plot of land 3 years ago. I'd saved for nearly a decade to afford this 5-acre parcel just outside town. It was perfect, quiet, spacious, with a small creek running through the back corner. I'd planned to build eventually, but was taking my time getting the plans just right while I continued saving for construction costs. I live about 40 minutes away, so I don't visit the property daily. I try to go at least twice a month to check things, clear any debris, and just enjoy the peace. That's why it took me almost a week to discover someone had started building on my land. I remember driving up and seeing dust clouds rising from my property. At first, I thought maybe a neighbor was doing some work nearby, but when I turned onto my access road, I froze. There were cement trucks, a small bulldozer, and several pickup trucks parked on my land. Workers were bustling around, and the foundation for what looked like a decent-sized house had already been poured. I slammed on my brakes and jumped out of my car. I immediately asked what was going on and who had allowed this construction. One of the workers pointed to a woman who looked in her 50s, standing near a folding table with what looked like blueprints. She looked up at me with annoyance, like I was interrupting something important. When she asked if she could help me, I told her she could explain why she was building on my property. Her expression changed to something between pity and looking down on me. She told me there must be a mix-up because the land belonged to her family and always had. I said this was impossible since I bought the land 3 years ago and had all the paperwork to prove it. Karen said paperwork could be wrong. She explained her great-great-grandfather had built the original homestead here in 1887, and the land was stolen from her family during the railroad expansion. She said she was simply taking back what was rightfully theirs. I noticed she'd already installed a mailbox at the entrance to my property. It had her last name painted on it in fancy script letters. I told her that she needed to stop construction immediately and get off my land. She said she didn't like my tone. She said she'd spent months researching her family history and that her ancestors' blood and sweat was in this soil. According to her, no piece of modern paper could change that fact. When I told her that her family history didn't override legal ownership and that I was calling the police, she told me to go ahead. She said she'd already talked with them about her heritage reclamation project and that everyone in town knew this was historically her family's property. I did call the police, but she was right about one thing. They weren't much help. The officer who showed up seemed confused by the situation, and since she had what looked like construction permits, though I later learned they were for a different location entirely, he said it was a civil matter and suggested I speak with a lawyer. The next few weeks were strange. I talked with my attorney who told me I was in the right but said getting an emergency court order could take time. Meanwhile, Karen continued building. The framing went up, then partial exterior walls. She even had landscapers come in to plant ornamental trees along what she was calling her driveway. What really bothered me was finding out she'd been telling everyone in our small town that I was trying to steal her family's ancestral land. Several people I thought were friendly started giving me cold looks at the local coffee shop. My lawyer told me to document everything while we waited for our court date, so I installed security cameras and visited regularly, taking photos and videos of the construction progress. Karen would sometimes be there, showing friends around her dream home like she was hosting a TV show. I heard her telling visitors that one room would be the entertainment space with floor-to-ceiling windows looking over the creek. She bragged that the kitchen would have imported Italian marble, saying she was restoring the property to its rightful glory. After talking with my lawyer again, I made a decision. Legally, I could remove unauthorized structures from my own property. I had all the documentation proving ownership. I decided to let her get in even deeper before making my move. 2 months after she'd started building, the house was about 60% complete. She'd installed windows, most of the roof, and even had the electricians in. That's when I scheduled the demolition crew. I made sure everything was perfectly legal. I had my property deed, survey maps, and demolition permits all in order. I even told the police in advance that I would be removing unauthorized structures from my land. The day of the demolition, I arrived early with my lawyer. The crew showed up with their equipment, including a small wrecking ball for the framed sections. We had just started when Karen's SUV came flying up the dirt road, stopping in a cloud of dust. She jumped out face red. She yelled at us, asking what we were doing and telling us to stop immediately. I explained that I was removing unauthorized structures from my property, as was my legal right. Karen became even more upset, shouting that this was her house and her family's land, and that I couldn't do this. She tried to physically block the demolition equipment, standing in front of the bulldozer with her arms out. My lawyer called the police, who arrived quickly. Karen asked the officers to arrest me for destroying her home. The police officer looked at me for an explanation. I showed him my property deed and permits for removing unauthorized structures. I explained that this woman had begun building without my permission or any legal right to be on my land. I handed over my folder of documentation. After checking my paperwork, the officer asked Karen if she had documentation proving ownership of the land. Karen said she had her family history and her great-great-grandfather's journal, saying the land was stolen from them. When the officer asked her for legal proof of ownership, Karen became upset, saying the situation was outrageous. She kept saying that her ancestors had lived there, and that meant more than some piece of paper. The officer told Karen that without legal documentation, there was nothing they could do to stop the property owner from removing structures. Karen said she'd already spent over $200,000 on the construction. I pointed out that she had done so without permission on land she didn't own. She broke down crying as the demolition continued, watching as the walls came down and her dream home was wrecked. She screamed, she threatened, she begged, but in the end, she couldn't stop what was happening. Once the demolition was complete, the police walked her off my property. I had her mailbox removed the next day and sent her a bill for the cleanup costs through my lawyer. I never saw her again after that, though I heard she moved away from our town entirely. I finally started building my own home there last year, after making sure all my permits were displayed at the entrance to my property. I'm a 29-year-old woman with an 11-year-old calico cat named Daisy, who means the world to me. My story starts about a year ago when I moved a few hours away from my hometown for a new job. The move was exciting but came with challenges, especially finding pet care for when my fiancé, 34 male, and I needed to travel. We found someone through a pet sitting app, but she became unavailable during the week we planned a trip. This came up during dinner at my sister's house. My niece suggested her cousin Ava, 18 female, who was looking for side jobs to make money before college in the fall. It seemed like perfect timing. She needed money. We needed a sitter. I reached out to Ava and she agreed to watch Daisy during our week-long trip. I invited Ava over before our departure so she could meet Daisy and learn about our home. I showed her where everything was: food, treats, toys, litter box, and went over our care routine. The most important rule was that Daisy should never be let outside unleashed and without supervision. I showed Ava the harness and leash I use for Daisy's walks and told her about the dangers of letting her out alone: cars, other animals, getting lost. Ava nodded along, seeming to understand how important this rule was. My fiancé and I left for our trip, feeling confident that Daisy was in good hands. The vacation was wonderful, relaxing, exactly what we needed, but that feeling ended when we returned home. We arrived yesterday and met Ava as she was finishing her final visit. I was excited to see my cat and picked her up for cuddles. That's when I noticed something concerning: scratches on Daisy's body. I asked Ava if she knew what happened to Daisy and if she had noticed these scratches. Ava replied vaguely that she wasn't sure. I pointed out that the scratches weren't there when we left, so something must have happened while we were gone. Ava then suggested that maybe Daisy got them during one of their walks, mentioning that sometimes she tries to run after birds. Something about her explanation didn't seem right. I went to check the harness and leash, finding them in the exact same spot where I'd left them before our trip, unused. I asked Ava directly if she had let Daisy outside without the harness and leash. Ava shifted before finally telling the truth. She said yes, she had let Daisy out but tried to claim it wasn't her fault. She told me Daisy wouldn't stop meowing for food and treats during one visit when Ava had a headache. She said the noise bothered her so much that she put Daisy outside for a while so she could set up the food and clean the litter box in peace. I tried to stay calm as I asked about the scratches and how they happened. That's when Ava told me she had actually forgotten Daisy outside all night. She described how when she came back the next morning for feeding, Daisy wasn't waiting by the door as usual. Ava then remembered she'd put her outside and had to shake a bag of Daisy's favorite treats to bring her back. She tried to make it seem like it wasn't a big deal by saying Daisy was fine. I was very angry. My elderly cat had been left outside all night, alone, without protection, in a new neighborhood. After I had clearly told her how dangerous that was, I told Ava she needed to leave right away. She asked about her payment and said she had taken care of Daisy all week. I told her she wouldn't be getting paid because she had put my cat in danger after I told her not to. Ava complained that it wasn't fair to not pay her for the entire week over just one mistake. I told her it was one mistake that could have killed my cat, and that she had ignored the most important rule I gave her. After more arguing, she finally left. Later that day, I got a text apology from Ava, but it didn't seem real. Then came the texts from my brother-in-law, Ava's uncle. My brother-in-law told me I needed to pay Ava for the week she worked. He said he understood I was upset, but that not paying her at all was too much. I told him she had put my cat in danger by ignoring my instructions and that I would be using that money for a vet visit instead. He suggested I could pay her less for one day, but said that not paying her at all was wrong. The texts continued with my brother-in-law saying I was being unfair to Ava. He said she was just a kid who made one small mistake. He even said I was being mean and not reasonable. I've scheduled a vet appointment for Daisy tomorrow to check for serious damage beyond the scratches. Who knows what happened to her during that night outside? She could have fought with another animal, eaten something toxic, or been hit by a car. My brother-in-law suggested I pay Ava but take off the cost of the vet visit. If I did that, she'd actually end up owing me money, which I don't want to deal with. I've told both of them that the best I can do is call it even. I don't pay her, and she doesn't have to pay Daisy's vet bills. I don't consider Ava family. She's my brother-in-law's step-niece, and I'd never met her before this. I trusted her based on my brother-in-law saying she was responsible and had pet sitting experience. That was clearly a mistake I won't make again. Moving to a new city is stressful enough without dealing with entitled people. I relocated about 3 weeks ago for a job I couldn't pass up. Since I've lived in cities before, I know parking can be a nightmare. So before signing the lease, I asked my landlord about the parking situation. During the walk-through, my landlord told me there was an empty space right next to the building. He told me it was included in my rent and would be mine. Perfect. I was relieved since I rely on my motorcycle to get around. It's nothing fancy, just a reliable ride that gets me from point A to point B. After moving in, the landlord showed me which spot was mine, and I parked my bike there. Everything was fine for the first week. Then I started noticing something strange. I come home from work and find a silver sedan parked in front of my motorcycle, blocking me in there. The first time I figured it was just someone making a quick stop. By the third time I knew something was up. I started taking pictures of the car to document what was happening. Then yesterday morning I got lucky. I was getting ready for work, looked out my window, and saw the same silver sedan pulling into the spot in front of my bike. I decided to watch and see who this mystery parker was. What happened next made my blood boil. The driver backed up directly into my motorcycle. I could see my bike wobble as the sedan's bumper pushed against it. Without thinking, I shouted out my open window just a loud "hey" that came out of nowhere for them. The car jerked forward a bit, then continued parking. A woman in a business suit got out looking annoyed. When she spotted me coming down from my apartment, she went on the offensive. The woman started berating me, asking why my motorcycle was in what she claimed was her parking space. She said she had been parking there for 2 years. I was stunned. This was the spot my landlord assigned to me. I told her this was actually my space, and that the landlord had assigned it to me when I moved in. The woman refused to accept this. She argued that she had always parked there and said there was nowhere else for her to park in the neighborhood. I told her this was my assigned spot that I was paying for. I also mentioned that she had just backed into my motorcycle. She threatened to call the police. I told her to go ahead, letting her know I had photos of her hitting my bike and blocking my assigned space. This caught her off guard, but she kept going. She told me she worked at the accounting firm down the street and claimed she'd parked there for years with permission. She asked who told me this was my spot. I simply said it was the landlord, the person who owns the property. She said another tenant had told her she could use this spot. She walked off. As soon as she left, I checked my motorcycle for damage, just a minor scratch, then called my landlord. I explained the situation and sent over the photos I'd taken. My landlord told me the spot was mine. He said no one else had rights to it, especially not someone who didn't live in the building. He said he would handle the situation. The landlord later told me this woman had never paid for the parking space and never signed any agreement. A former tenant had told her she could use the spot sometimes, and she took that as permanent permission. That evening, I got a text from my landlord saying they'd told the woman she needed to park elsewhere. I felt relieved, but something told me it wasn't over. When I went out to my balcony the next morning to drink my coffee, I noticed something strange below. There was a plastic water bottle and a half-eaten strawberry tossed right next to where my bike was parked. At least my motorcycle looked untouched. I took photos of these items too, just in case things got worse. That afternoon, I installed a small camera on my balcony pointed toward my parking spot. This morning, I checked the camera footage and saw her drive by slowly around 7 a.m., looking at my motorcycle. She didn't stop. I'm gonna keep documenting everything. If she damages my property again, I'll call the police. It's ridiculous that some people feel entitled to things that don't belong to them. This parking spot is assigned to my apartment. I'm paying for it as part of my rent. Just because someone used something that wasn't theirs for a while doesn't make it theirs. I'm hoping this will blow over soon, but I think this woman isn't done with her revenge. For now, I'm watching and documenting everything. The landlord is on my side and I have evidence if things get worse. I love celebrating my birthday. It's the one day where I get to be selfish, surrounded by people who care about me. This year felt important because I was feeling like myself again after a breakup. 2 weeks. That's how long it had been since I ended things with my ex. Our relationship had been getting worse for months, with arguments, broken promises, and me always giving more than receiving. When I finally ended it, he seemed shocked, like he couldn't understand why I'd want out. The breakup was exhausting. He called constantly, showed up at my workplace once, and sent many texts from missing me to saying I was making a mistake. I blocked him everywhere, needing a clean break. My birthday party was supposed to be my fresh start. I rented the back room of my favorite restaurant, invited 20 close friends, and paid for a professional playlist. My brother was there too. He'd driven 3 hours to celebrate with me. The party was going well. I was 3 cocktails in, laughing at something my work friend said when I felt a change in the room's energy. I turned around, and there was my ex standing in the doorway of my birthday party, looking around like he belonged. My friend noticed him too and asked if that was my ex. I said yep. She offered to get security, but I told her to give me a minute. I walked over to him trying to stay calm. He wore the shirt I bought him for Christmas, which felt like a choice. I asked what he was doing at my party. He said he wanted to wish me happy birthday. I told him he could have texted. He reminded me I blocked him. I said there was a reason for that. He claimed since he was part of my past, he should be at important moments in my life. My hand shook, but my voice stayed steady. I told him this party wasn't for exes, but for people currently in my life, people I wanted around. He got defensive, puffing his chest like he did when challenged. He said we shared a year of our lives, and that didn't just disappear because I decided I was done. My brother had been watching from nearby and stepped forward with his beer, looking unimpressed. He asked my ex if he was just there to remind me of bad decisions. My ex tried to respond but couldn't find the words. My brother stood there with one eyebrow raised, waiting. My ex looked at me, then my brother, then around the room. Everyone was watching. The music seemed too loud, making the moment more awkward. My ex started to say something, but my brother cut him off. He told my ex he was wrong and pointed to the exit, firmly enough that the message was clear. My ex's face turned red. For a second, I thought he might cause trouble. He had that look when he was about to be stubborn, but he looked at all the people watching and seemed to give up. He said happy birthday before walking out with hunched shoulders. The door closed with a soft click that felt louder than it was. My brother asked if I was okay. I said I was and thanked him. He joked that scaring off unwanted guests was what big brothers do. He gave me a side hug and went back to his conversation. I stood there thinking about what happened. The nerve of my ex to think he could show up and get back into my life. Like breaking up was just something he could fix by being persistent. Later that night, after most guests left and we were cleaning up, my friend mentioned the incident again. She commented on my ex's dramatic entrance. I said it was typical for him, always thinking he was the main character in everyone's story. She mentioned how quickly my brother handled it. I agreed, saying it was the best birthday gift. At home, I found my ex had messaged me on an app I forgot to block. He wrote paragraphs about me being immature, my brother being disrespectful, and him just wanting to be civil. I blocked him without responding. Part of me wanted to thank him because his stunt gave me something valuable, proof I made the right choice in ending things. Seeing him there, acting entitled to my time on my birthday was closure I didn't know I needed. The next morning, my brother texted offering help if my ex showed up at my place, saying he had more comments ready. I replied that my ex got the message but thanked him for supporting me. He just said always. That's the thing about entitled people. They think the world revolves around their feelings. My ex thought his desire to see me was more important than my boundaries. He thought crashing my birthday party was romantic instead of disrespectful. But sometimes someone needs to call out that entitlement, like my brother did, to make them realize they're not the main character in everyone's story. Work wasn't too stressful, and I got through all my morning meetings without any major issues. By noon, my stomach was growling loudly enough that I couldn't ignore it anymore, so I decided to head out for lunch at this little sandwich place near my office. The place has amazing food but terrible parking. It's in one of those strip malls where there's a mix of restaurants, a bank, and a few retail stores, all sharing the same cramped lot. Usually I can snag a spot if I come during off-peak hours, but today the lot seemed busier than usual. When I pulled into the entrance, I immediately noticed a problem. The path to the empty spaces at the far end was completely blocked. A shiny black Lexus sport utility vehicle was just stopped in the middle of the driving lane, behind the row of parked cars. Normally, you could squeeze past a car doing this, but making matters worse, directly across from this Lexus was an enormous pickup truck. This monster truck was hanging so far out of its parking space that it created a perfect blockade with the Lexus. I sat there for a moment wondering if I should just leave and find somewhere else to eat. But then I noticed someone was actually sitting in the Lexus. Great. They could just move and let me through. I gave a polite little honk to get their attention. A woman in her 40s with perfectly styled hair stepped out of the driver's side. She was dressed in business casual attire and had that look of impatience. I rolled down my window, trying to keep my tone friendly. I asked the woman if she could move her car into a parking space or at least pull forward so people could get through. I made sure to point behind me where another car had pulled in and was now also stuck. The woman looked at me like I'd just asked her to donate a kidney. She let out this sigh and rolled her eyes. She told me that she just needed to run into the bank real quick. I tried to reason with her, explaining that she could simply move her car first so we all could get through. Her response was dismissive. She said she'd be in and out in 5 minutes, as if that made it okay to block everyone. Before I could respond, she turned her back to me and walked toward the Wells Fargo bank entrance. She didn't even bother looking back. I was dumbfounded. There were at least 6 empty parking spaces only about 30 or 40 feet away from where she had stopped. But walking those extra steps was too much effort for her. She wasn't elderly or disabled in any way. She didn't have children with her. There were no emergency lights flashing on her vehicle. She just decided that her time was more valuable than everyone else's. By now another car had pulled in behind me, so 3 of us were trapped because of this one person. I looked at the driver behind me in my rearview mirror, and we shared that look of, "Can you believe this?" I honked again. Longer this time, hoping she might hear it inside the bank and reconsider. But nothing happened. She was already inside, probably standing in line, completely unbothered by the chaos she'd created outside. At this point, the driver behind me started honking too. Not at me, but at the situation. We were all caught in this ridiculous parking lot purgatory. The driver behind me rolled down his window and asked if that car was just going to sit there. I explained that the woman had refused to move, saying she was just making a quick bank visit. The man said he was already late for an appointment. I told him I had tried to convince her. There was no other option. I had to perform an awkward turn in the narrow entrance. It took about 10 points in this turn because there was so little space to move. The car behind me had to back up to give me room, and then they had to do the same dance to get out. I could see the driver who was stuck on the other side of the Lexus doing the same thing. This poor person was making a slow turn while cars were lining up behind them on that side too. When I finally got turned around, I looked at the bank entrance again. Through the glass doors, I could see the woman standing in line checking her phone, completely unaware of the traffic jam she'd created. I thought about waiting for her to come out just to tell her how rude she'd been, but I only had an hour for lunch and she'd already wasted enough of my time. So I drove off, found a spot at another restaurant down the street, and tried to enjoy my meal despite still feeling annoyed. What gets me is how she dismissed everyone else's needs. There were plenty of actual parking spaces just a short walk away, but she couldn't be bothered to use them. The extra 20 seconds of walking was too much to ask. The worst part is that people like this rarely face any problems for their actions. She'll probably continue blocking parking lots because it works for her. Meanwhile, the rest of us who follow basic social etiquette have to work around these obstacles. I wonder what goes through people's minds when they do things like this. Do they not realize how they're affecting others, or do they just not care? Either way, it's a special kind of entitlement to think your quick bank errand justifies blocking multiple people from going about their day. Next time I need lunch, I think I'll just bring something from home. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.